Welcome to the AI Chat Podcast. I'm your host, Jaden Schaefer. Every day we break down breaking AI news stories and explain their implications in your life and in business. I need to ask you for a big favor. Believe it or not, we have around 92,000 people that listen to this podcast every month, which is absolutely amazing. But when you go to our Apple Podcast or Spotify pages, we only have around 110 reviews total. If you could do me a massive favor and give this podcast a review, I would be super, super grateful. Every time I contact an incredible founder or CEO in AI, they look at the podcast, they look at how many reviews I have, and that helps me to get better guests on the show. So if you could do a huge favor to myself and also yourself, go to the Apple Podcast or the Spotify page, wherever you listen to this, and give a review of the show. If you've noticed lately, I've been doing interviews with some really phenomenal CEOs. I have some more amazing ones coming up in the coming weeks with some CEOs that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars for their AI startups. I want to bring these to you and I want to get more of those. So please drop a review, go to your wife's account, go to your husband's account, go to your kid's account and leave a review. I don't care. Help us get more reviews, and I promise I will help bring some amazing AI entrepreneurs and guests onto the show. Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? I record and publish podcasts on a platform called Spotify for Podcasters, and I absolutely love it. Essentially, you can upload from your phone or computer, and it distributes to every platform that plays podcasts. They support video podcasts, and you can make money on the platform with ads or even podcast subscriptions, something that has made my life so much easier as a podcaster. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you give it a try. You can download the Spotify for Podcast app or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started on your podcast today. GitHub has just announced a big new product that I believe is going to solve an issue a lot of people have had, specifically with GitHub's AI Copilot. So in the past, a lot of people complained when this thing first launched because essentially GitHub's Copilot was trained on, all of the repositories on GitHub, all of the code on GitHub. But the issue was a lot of private repositories were used for training, and people were finding that when they were, getting Copilot to recommend code, it was recommending code from, repositories that were supposed to be private, like things coming out of Apple. And of course, this is a big no-no if people are able to get code straight out of Apple's, private IP, their private repositories. So GitHub had to do some quick shuffling back then. I believe they pulled all the private repositories out of their data set, retrained it. They were able to get rid of that. But still, people to this day are complaining, about essentially having code that is from other people's repositories. They did try to put another solution in place. In any case, this has been a problem that they've had for quite a while, and today they may have come out with a solution. So on the podcast, we are going to be diving into what exactly happened and what they did here. So in 2022, GitHub put in motion a feature that essentially permitted users to automatically block suggestions of matching public code, right? This makes a lot of sense. This is public code. They don't want the suggestions if it looks like they just straight up plagiarized and copied it somewhere. They could be liable. So while this did address one issue, it didn't answer all of the concerns. According to GitHub and a spokesperson there, the system would come into play less than 1% of the time. So it's kind of an interesting idea, maybe gave some people peace of mind, but in reality, it wasn't actually used very much. So developers might be intrigued to inspect these code fragments, either to incorporate them or perhaps to kind of explore the entire library from which the snippet originated, right, of that 1% of the time. So in an effort to kind of bridge this divide between both desires, GitHub has announced the launch of a private beta of a code referencing feature for GitHub Copilot. So rather than an outright blockage of matching code, developers are now empowered with a choice. When code referencing is activated, Copilot showcases the matching code in a sidebar, and it gives the developers the freedom to decide essentially their fate, right? What they want to do, if they want to take this code that's somewhere else or not. Now, the thing that I actually see being valuable here, they say, oh, this is less than 1%, yada, yada. And I know they try to downplay it. But if you're trying to code something, you can't figure it out, it's really complicated, you see someone else has done it, it's part of that, 1%. Sometimes the 1% of code is still the valuable percentage that a lot of people would like to use, or it's really valuable, or it's the trickiest part, right? So let's say it's there. I think developers would like the option of being able to see that code, and some people are like, oh, then they can copy it. In reality, I think they would like to see it, and maybe they would just like to see how it was coded. They can write it their own way. But I think that it's actually a really useful, even if not for anything but educational purposes, I think it's a really useful tool. So this feature is planned to expand to Copilot chat eventually. So it was previewed last November, but the feature required some fine-tuning before its release. And GitHub CEO Thomas Domke expressed that major players, including Microsoft, GitHub, and most Copilot enterprise customers utilizing the original using the original blocking feature. So, however, he also acknowledged its limitations, stating, quote, "It gives you a little control to decide for yourself whether you actually want to take that code and attribute it back to an open source license. It doesn't actually let you discover that there might be a library that you could use instead of synthesizing code. It prevents you from exploring these libraries and submitting pull requests. You might be reproducing everything that already exists in some open source repo." So Domke highlights that this was particularly relevant to commonplace computer algorithms like sorting. The newly introduced feature will allow developers to reject the code, use it directly if the library allows, or have Copilot reformulate the code. So the current version doesn't actually allow for results filtering by specific licenses, but the team is working, they're getting feedback to kind of gauge the necessity of adding that. They said, quote, "We're letting people understand the match and then go on and explore or go and make the right decision." So Domke explained, adding that he believes it fills the gap in the original solution. So the code referencing feature pretty much tends to be more active in scenarios where Copilot, it kind of lacks context. So when there's tons of context and that's all available, from existing code, Copilot is a lot less likely to suggest matching public code. However, at the initial stages, I think the likelihood of generating matching code actually increases. So central to this whole kind of initiative is a fast search engine, which is aiming to essentially keep latency within 10 to 20 milliseconds. I think this is really big. No one wants to wait for their code to generate. No one wants to wait a long time for anything. And I think increasing the speed is a big bonus on this. So it can rapidly essentially identify matching code and its licenses. You're not waiting around for that. And currently the matching snippets are listed in the order found, but in line with GitHub's original announcement, future functionality is going to be to sort by repository license, commit date, and etc. And that can be expected in the near future. So in essence, GitHub's a new feature manifests a nuanced approach to code referencing, catering to the multifaceted need of developers, right? And I think that the ever-changing landscape of software development continues to be shaped. We're seeing a lot of rapid developments here, and I think that GitHub's latest move is a reflection of the delicate balance between innovation and also responsible coding practices. So I think this is going to be an interesting story to follow in the future, seeing how they roll this out and how this is actually adopted by enterprise.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. That's the sound of switching your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling. Harness the best converting checkout and same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Stop leaving sales on the table. Discover why millions trust Shopify to build, grow, and run their business. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech23.
Thank you for listening to the AI Chat podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, I'd appreciate it if you rate us wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you're looking for an innovative group of AI enthusiasts, make sure to check out our Discord channel and Facebook community. It's obviously a lot more interactive than a podcast where we can share software, tools, and prompts we're using in AI every day. I'll leave a link for those in the description below.